our audience sees us, that it's really working.
Oh, Hot Rod wants us to wait 30 minutes.
30 minutes? No. I'm sorry. I have things to do, like sleep later this evening.
Same.
We shall. It's live. Okay. So without further ado, let's begin. In 3, 2, this is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 693, recorded on Wednesday, October 24th, 2018. Everything you wanted to know about gravitational waves. Hey everyone, I am Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we are going to fill your heads with bird brains, dead dinos, and black holes. But first,
disclaimer. Throughout history, humans have dreamed up many a supernatural entity to explain the world around them. There were sun gods, gods of lightning and thunder, gods of the east wind, who are not to be confused with the gods in charge of the western or northwestern winds. There were deities of death, of love, of war, and of fertility, as well as immortal managers of the more mundane, charged with looking over the well-being of lost sheep and comfortable footwear. There were times where you couldn't spit in any direction without hitting a god or goddess of this or that. And then there were the gods who claimed to be responsible for just about everything. But ever missing from the list of the duty-bound deities was a god of gravity. Perhaps the greatest omnipresent force throughout the universe, and no god claimed it as an occupation or to be its creator. We humans, so fond of gifting God's powers, great and small, found gravity to be too trivial a task to ask a god to get involved. Was it so ingrained in human intuition that up is up and down is down that we failed to question further? And while the gods of old may have missed their opportunity to take on such mysteries, we will not, because we are the almighty This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I wanna learn everything. I wanna fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I wanna know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and to you too, Justin, Blair, and everyone out there. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Science. We're back yet again after a week of happenings. So many happenings in the world. Science happened all over the place. And we're back again. Blair's back. Did you have a good trip to Texas?
Oh my God, I did. It was amazing.
Did you learn lots and you're going to teach us lots?
Yeah, absolutely. I also visited a beach that was south of me, which was very confusing. I'm used to the west and the east, but a south beach, it messed up my sense of direction all over the place.
Oh, California girl. California girl problems. Oh my goodness. All right, everyone. We have so much ahead for you tonight on the show. I have stories about brainy birds, and we have an interview on the subject of black holes and gravitational waves coming up in just a little bit. Justin, what did you bring?
Let's see. I've got new insights onto what killed the dinosaurs and how twisted light will untangle future internet logjams, which isn't quite a perfect analogy, but it'll have to do.
Okay, good enough. And Blair, what did you bring for the animal corner?
Oh, I brought some parenting tips from around the animal kingdom. And as a bonus, I also brought some lizard dreams.
What do lizards dream of?
I don't know, but I can tell you how, which is what the story is about.
All right. So if androids dream of electric sheep, lizards must dream of This Week in Science. If you have not yet subscribed to this podcast, you can do so. Just look for This Week in Science online in any podcast player, iTunes or Google Podcast or any other one that you happen to enjoy. We're also on YouTube. We are on Facebook. Find us and subscribe to us if you want to keep up with the This Week in Science goings on. Now, though, it is time for us to dig in to our wonderful interview for this show. We are joined tonight by Dr. Daniel Holz. He is a professor at the University of Chicago in the Enrico Fermi Institute, the Department of Physics, the Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and the Kavli Institute for Cosmological Physics. He studies gravitational waves and black holes and is a member of LIGO. That's the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. Dr. Holz, welcome to This Week in Science. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on the show. Okay, we have talked about LIGO on and on and on since LIGO first started being a thing in the news, you know, a glimmer in the astrophysicist's eye. We've been talking about it, the discoveries it's been making, but we're so excited to chat with you. Let's just get started from the basics. What is a gravitational wave?
Oh, yeah. So a gravitational wave, what we usually say is it's a ripple in space-time. Okay, so we have this idea that the universe is not just space and time separate, but they're combined. This was one of Einstein's big insights. And because it's this kind of combined thing, this fabric, you can have ripples in it. And okay, that sounds kind of abstract. The way I usually think about it is, let's just imagine a different thing. There's a pond, and there's a duck on the pond. And as the duck moves, it sends out ripples in the pond. And those ripples are telling you that the duck is moving. And if you could measure the ripples around the edge of the pond, you'd be able to figure out where the duck is and what it's up to. If the duck stops, no more ripples.
Right.
So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay, then,
But I'm going to interject slightly but what's the wave?
so in the case of the duck in the pond, the duck is, disturbing the water, and that causes oscillations in the water, which then propagate out. Okay, now gravitational waves are the exact same thing, except you replace the pond with space-time, and you replace the duck with two black holes going at close to the speed of light. And then otherwise, it's exactly the same thing. The black holes are disturbing space-time. As they move around, the gravity changes, and that sends out ripples. And by measuring the ripples, we can figure out what's happening, where these black holes are and what they're up to. And you can think of it as the ripples are really carrying the information about the black holes moving around out to the rest of the universe.
Is there energy in those ripples, or is it not energy itself that's being rippled? But
yes, very great. So this was a big question, and it took decades for people to figure this out, because general relativity is a little tricky, and sometimes there are some things that you think are real but turn out not to be real. We have technical terms for that, but there was this question, are the waves real and do they carry energy? And it's one of these stories, there are always stories like this. It's a Feynman story. Feynman went to a conference and he said what is now called the famous Feynman sticky bead argument. He asked the following question. Well, what do the waves do? Like on the pond, they cause things to go up and down. Gravitational waves cause things to move back and forth, in the sense that as gravitational waves are going through this room right now, we know that, as the waves go through the room, in effect, it's as if the walls are getting farther apart and closer together, and the ceiling and the floor are getting farther apart and closer together, and it's oscillating. And Feynman said, if this is happening, you could imagine you have a bead, and it's on a rod, and it's moving back and forth with the gravitational waves. And if it's a little sticky, it'll heat up the rod, and therefore they carry energy. And that, I mean, there was some math too, but basically that solved this big problem that for decades had, troubled some of the leading figures in physics. And so everyone was like, okay, you know what? That's pretty compelling. They must carry energy. And so, yes, they carry energy. It's not totally obvious. It took a while for people to figure it out. But yes, they carry energy.
But that energy sounds like it's dependent on what matter the gravity wave is interacting with.
So the energy depends on what generated the ripples in the first place.
Oh, okay.
And just to give a sense, I mean, we'll talk more about this, but the very first event we detected, which was this thing we call 150914, it was 2 black holes. It was, you probably talked about, it was very exciting. That event was the equivalent of taking 3 times the mass of the sun. So that's a lot of mass. The sun's pretty big. And turning it instantaneously into pure energy and emitting it throughout the universe. So it's the brightest or the most energetic event we've ever detected by far in the history of the universe. It was far away and all that energy came out in gravitational waves, but it was really loud in a way that's very hard to wrap your mind around, like staggeringly so. There's so much energy in the gravitational waves. It's just mind-blowing.
So what do these gravitational waves, when we're looking at them, what do they tell us about the universe? I mean, we're understanding now that these waves are carrying energy, they're transmitting this energy, making things oscillate because of their waveforms. But what does it tell us?
Right. So it depends on, what we're detecting, but in the ones we've seen so far, it's telling us, for example, in one case, it's 2 black holes. And it tells us, okay, we have 2 black holes. Here's how big they are. Here's how fast they're moving. Here's where they are in the universe. We get some information, for example, it's something that's very interesting. If you study this stuff, are the black holes spinning? Because black holes can spin.
This is a question I have. Yeah, do they?
We'll get to that.
So these are things that we can learn by measuring. You can think of it as a sound. We use the analogy of sound. So you can look at things and that's, light bouncing off electrons, or you can listen to these ripples in space-time. You don't use your ears and it's not really sound. It's carried through space-time itself, but it's a lot like sound in that it's oscillations. You can take the oscillations, you can put them into a speaker, and then play the sound and hear it, and it sounds like a chirp. And by analyzing that chirp, I mean, it really sounds like whoop. By analyzing exactly how it does that, you can figure all this stuff out, like the masses and the spins. And by doing it in multiple places, you can figure out where it came from on the sky. And one of the most interesting things for me, you can also figure out how far away it is by how loud it is. And that's a major big deal, because this is a way to figure out how far something is way out far into the universe. We can still sort of directly measure how far it is. And that's
a perfect segue into the study that just came out this week about from LIGO data related to using it as a standard candle. So the idea that we use supernovas, we use cosmic microwave background radiation to give us an idea of how far away things are and also how fast the universe is expanding and changing. Can you tell us about how you're using the LIGO data to figure out the distance and the expansion?
Right. Yeah. So this is something I'm very excited about. So what we're trying to measure here is what's called the Hubble constant, and it's the rate at which the universe is expanding around us. And to measure that, you need to know how far something is away from us and how quickly it's moving away from us. Okay, so you need to know both those things, and that it turns out it's difficult to measure how far something is. And so we use supernovae, we use the cosmic microwave background and ripples, and that there are various ways to do it.
And then the supernovae one is that we've called something a 1A and said this is the brightest that a thing can be, and therefore it's just a kind of, I guess, maybe an assumption that this is the brightest type of object, and therefore anything with this brightness, and that creates like the high point of how far away it is.
Right. So it's not that what you need is that they're all the same brightness. And then you can think of it as it's like if you had a 100-watt light bulb, if you know exactly how bright it is, as you move away, it's going to get dimmer. And if you could carefully measure just how dim it is, you could infer how far away it must be.
Yeah.
Assuming you know how bright it is, you know, when it's
always I've thought is a bit of an assumption, but maybe.
Yeah. So with the supernovae, people have studied very hard, done a lot of analyses with many supernovae, and they think they can more or less calibrate and figure out how bright they are intrinsically. We don't really understand that from what I would call first principles. Like I can't start writing down equations and come up with, oh, look, this is how bright the supernova is. We can't even really do it on a computer. We've been trying, but there's a plausible argument, and we observe many of them, and they do seem to be all more or less the same. Okay, that's one way, and that's been kind of the preferred way to measure distances, and that's how we discovered that the rate of expansion of the universe has been accelerating, and there must be dark energy, and there are a lot of very exciting things there that have come out of the supernova. What we're doing with the gravitational waves, which just hasn't been possible before. I mean, we talked about it. We said, wouldn't this be cool if one day we detected things and we could do this? But until recently, we never detected any gravitational waves. Now we have, and it's something we talked about just a little earlier. Now we can measure distance directly because we get the black holes. They go around each other, or also neutron stars, which is the sort of very exciting event we got last August. Okay, so those, we can measure the distance to that just by measuring that chirp and listening to how loud the chirp is in our LIGO detectors. We can figure out how far it is. But we can't figure out how fast it's moving. And so the funny thing, I mean, it's, okay, for the supernova case, the hard thing is measuring the distance. The easy thing is measuring how fast it's moving. Because we do a Doppler shift, you kind of look at the colors and you just see that the colors are shifted, and it tells you how fast it's moving away from us.
So, and if I'm not mistaken, Hubble's constant remains constant. So the speed at which it's moving away should then infer a distance all by itself, shouldn't it?
Okay, so two things. So first of all, Hubble's constant, unfortunately, I mean, it's constant in the sense that it's the value of the expansion today.
Yeah, okay.
But as you go earlier in the universe, the rate at which it was expanding changes. So that's just a minor detail, which, you know, it's something that can be confusing. So what we care about right now is what is the expansion rate today? But eventually we're going to tie that to figure out what the expansion rate was over the entire history of the universe, and that's a good thing to know.
So if you're looking at a black hole merger super far away from us, like that's in the distant past,
yes,
then potentially the constant that you're measuring for that event would be different than something that is closer to us in time.
Absolutely. So then we get to what's called the Hubble expansion, and the rate of expansion changes. So if you get far enough away, then you have to start considering all these other things. And that's good because the way that changes depends on, say, dark matter and especially dark energy. And so by getting far enough away, you start to figure out things about dark energy, for example, which is this mysterious stuff that we really want to learn about. To learn about that, we have to get far enough away to see these changes, which is something we can hope to do in the future.
Do you need a bigger interferometer to be able to?
Yes. So, in fact, so the current interferometers are about 2.5 miles long. And what we'd like to do is go a little bigger to, say, 1 million miles long.
Wow.
Which we're not going to be able to do on Earth. So we're going to go to space is the hope. So there's a project called LISA. And LISA would send up satellites and shoot lasers between them to do this in space. And that would, instead of seeing what we call little black holes of only 30 times the mass of the sun, so it's pretty big, but little. But this, Lisa would see 1 million solar mass black holes crashing into each other and see those to the very edge of the universe.
Wow.
I'm actually surprised that we can't see the big ones with the like. I would think you would need a bigger detector to see a smaller black hole.
One.
Yes, great. So, so what's happening here is an issue of frequency. So the little black holes go around each other really quickly, and the big black holes go around each other a little slower. And so the little black holes, actually, the ones we're detecting, they go around, when they're about to touch, they go around at, say, a few hundred times a second.
Wow.
Which is pretty fast.
Considering how big they are, that they would be moving that.
Yeah.
That's
Well, this is one thing, and it's again, what I say, it's very hard to really wrap your mind around, right? So you take the sun is pretty big.
Yeah.
A black hole, if you take the sun and you turn it into a black hole, that black hole is a couple of miles across.
Yeah.
So it's really super tiny. You're taking if you take the Earth, the Earth is probably easier because, you can look out the window. There's the Earth. It's kind of big. That, if it turns into a black hole, is about that big.
Oh, geez.
So, the Earth, it's, can go around pretty fast. And the sun, too, okay, they're not that big. If it's 30 times the mass of the sun, it's only 30 times bigger across.
Yeah, 60 miles. 60
right.
miles across.
So,
tiny.
That's okay, that's big, but that's not that big, and those things can go around each other really fast.
Yeah.
Because they've got a lot of gravity. And that's just because they're very, if you like, compact.
right.
And that's but if you take 1 million solar masses, like 1 million times the mass of the sun, like the black hole at the center of our galaxy, okay, now you're getting into, 1 million miles. Those things, by the time they touch, they're not going quite as fast. It takes them, I don't know, a few seconds to go around each other, 10 seconds. And so comparatively, that's slow.
So when that wave hits, that wave is over such a long duration of that wave starting and ending that the sensors just can't detect it. It's too subtle.
Right. It's what happens on Earth is that the Earth is shaking the Earth is shaking all the time. People are walking on it and stuff, but also earthquakes. So you can't, if anything that's fixed to the Earth is shaking uncontrollably a few times a second.
Wow.
And so you can't actually be sensitive to something that takes 10 seconds. It's just too long.
Got it.
And so if it's going around really, really fast, then it's fine because the shaking is slow enough that we can kind of screen it out and we can notice the little black holes going around each other. But the big ones, they're in the noise. We don't have access to them. We have to go to space where, in space, the Earth it doesn't matter that the Earth is shaking. You're in space, it doesn't matter.
And you get rid of the earthquakes, so it'll be better for detecting anyway.
That's exactly right. So those, the nuisance of the earthquakes. So, that's the future. But that, Lisa, is right now it's being led by Europe, and the US we're hoping to participate in it, and it'll be launched around 2032, something like that. It's a little ways away.
That's pretty soon for.
Yeah, it's not, you could imagine, getting excited about it and working on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I will say that for, at least, well, when I was a graduate student, people were saying, it's going to launch really soon, it's around the corner, and it was one of these things that every year was delayed by a year, and
kind of like the James Webb Space Telescope.
Right. It turns out sending, really complicated stuff into space is hard.
Yeah, you don't want to send up something half-baked that's not
That's right.
the best use of time or money.
I do wonder too, when you have a long-term project like this, how much with the technology advancing as it is, where 5 years into a project you go, wow, we really could just go down to Home Depot, or not Home Depot, Fry's Electronics, and pick up a couple of components for $50 that did everything that we spent all this time and money. Like I mean, the technology that allows us to do more stuff is advancing at a rate in which it might be worth waiting 2 years and saving 10 years of work.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tricky thing because you can always wait and never end up doing anything.
Right. And Voyager left the solar system, by the way.
Right. That's right.
Built that a really long time ago.
We could probably do a much better job now, but
right.
You know,
but we wouldn't have to wait.
And it's also, I mean, there's another aspect, which is the technology in some ways is more primitive, the stuff we launch into space, because it has to survive in space.
Right.
And space is not a nice place to be. There are lots of cosmic rays, and there's lots of stuff going on that's going to mess up all your electronics. So you have to be shielded, and you have to be, radiation hardened. And so it turns out that's hard to do, and you can't go to Fry's and pick that stuff up. I mean, you could, but
you don't want to. Yeah, you don't want to get something that'll burn up a chip too easily when it's out there.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
So another aspect of work, what actually led me to inviting you onto the show was a paper that you were involved in using LIGO to determine limits to the number of dimensions to space-time. And so, historically, we've had Brian Greene on the show in the past to talk about string theory and 11 dimensions and, so can you tell me about these limits that you detected?
And real quick, tiny, before you do, I assume that anybody who studies physics at some point is brought to a back room in the physics department and is asked to take either the red pill or the blue pill of going forth into the quantum direction or the standard model. It's like you have to choose. And is it satisfying to have maybe obliterated a large number of dimensions potentially?
Right. Well, it's okay. We're not going to get into the internal feelings. We're all one big happy family. There's no problem. The rest of my hallway here is full of string theorists. I'm a relativist. I do general relativity, which is gravity. I'm very happy with the 3 space dimensions and 1 time dimension that we seem to live in. But all my colleagues in this direction are quite creative and have come up with a lot more dimensions, which do help explain, or there's some interesting things that happen if you add extra dimensions. Okay, that's a long story. You probably heard it from Brian Greene. It's fine. But yes, the trick, and I think all physicists would agree on this, is you want to go out and measure everything you can.
Yes.
That's the goal. And so what's nice in this case, so this paper, I should say, it was done with a student who's working with me, Maya Fischbach, and another student at Princeton, Chris Pardo, and David Spergel, who's a faculty member at Princeton. And the 4 of us kind of came up with this idea, and it's something that people hadn't realized we could do. And then we had this great event, which was 170817, which hopefully you've talked about, which is this binary neutron star. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting about that one is we heard it in gravitational waves, but we also saw it in light. Yeah. And that combination has never been done before. And what we realized is we have the gravitational waves coming all the way across the universe to us, and we hear them. And then we have the light coming all the way across the universe to us, and we see it. And the fact that the amount of light we get and the amount of gravitational waves we get is consistent tells us something about the number of dimensions. And okay, it's not obvious that that's the case, but let's assume there are extra dimensions, as some people like. The reason you like extra dimensions is it changes the properties of gravity. And what happens generically is gravity leaks out into these extra dimensions.
Yeah, the gravitons get on like a metro, and for whatever reason they need to leave just for a minute before they come. That's
right. Some of them. Not all. Some say, you know what, we're going to go over there to that other dimension. It looks really much nicer over there. We don't want to go over. And so they leave. And which means, you know, by the time the waves get to us on Earth, they're soft. They're just not as loud as they should be. But the light in these theories in general comes straight to us. It doesn't notice the extra dimensions. Right? And so by comparing how bright something is and how loud it is, we can test whether the gravitons, whether the gravity is leaking out. And so that's the test we did. This is the first time we have this thing. It was at a 40 megaparsec, so it's like 120 million light years away. But we could measure how much gravity got to us, how much light got to us, and compare. And we did, and we found, lo and behold, we can count up the number of dimensions, and it's 3 plus 1, 3 space plus 1 time to about 1%. At least, we've confirmed it's within 1% of what I would call the right value of 3 plus 1, which is kind of amazing.
But you left them too much room, because now they're going to wrap up 30 tiny dimensions in that 1%. And now,
right. But okay, so there are some caveats. It's always not as so we're measuring dimensions, but these are pretty big dimensions. So if you take tiny little dimensions like this big or really much, much smaller than this, and you wrap up the dimensions like that, then the gravitational waves go right through it and they don't leak out. And so the general string theory, the kind of generic version, that's what it does. It compactifies the dimensions so small that nothing notices the dimensions except the tiny little strings. And
so there still could be these dimensions.
So they could still be there because they've conveniently wrapped them up where there's no way to notice them. But what we can tell you for sure is that there are no dimensions, there are no big dimensions. And we can quantify exactly what that means. And there's definitely been a lot of interest in big dimensions, because if you have gravity leaking out in big dimensions, that would maybe explain the dark matter and the dark energy. And that would be incredibly exciting. Maybe we're not detecting dark matter, this mysterious stuff that's pulling galaxies together in weird ways. Maybe it's not dark matter. It's just that gravity itself is weak. And why is it weak? Well, on those large scales, the gravity is leaking out. And so we're not actually seeing dark matter. We're just seeing gravity breaking. And that's
not happening.
It looks like it's not happening. It would have been cool. But sorry, it looks okay. So if that's happening, it's just not, basically, it's not happening on the scales we're proving. So it's not happening on these cosmological scales.
So where does this lead you? What are the next questions related to the dark matter, dark energy, this weakening of gravity that was assumed? Where do you go now?
Yeah, so there are lots of different. I mean, so one thing which is hard to we had no detections for a long time. I mean, these things were predicted. I mean, Einstein wrote down that there should be gravitational waves in 1917.
We always believed in them here on this show.
Yeah, that's good. Me too. Believe. Okay, so it took us forever to see them. Now we're detecting them, but we've detected basically 5 binary black hole systems and 1 binary neutron star. And yet we figured all this stuff out, like, now we can measure the number of space, all this stuff. But we're just in the very beginning. It's like the very first time you point a telescope, you've seen a few things. Oh, look, there's a planet that looks like a galaxy over there. You got like 6 things. I mean, we have a long way to go. The universe is chock full of stuff happening. And so part of this is just, we're not, I mean, 2 years ago, no one had even thought, we could measure the number of space-time dimensions in this way. And now we're doing it. So we don't know what we're going to come up with going forward. Okay, that's the kind of generic disclaimer. All the great stuff is stuff I'm not going to talk about because, we haven't figured it out yet, and it's going to be awesome. But stuff that we do expect, stuff I'm immediately excited about, is something we were talking about earlier, is measuring these distances. And so with this same event, we measured the distance to about 40 megaparsecs, that's 120 million light years. Okay, so we measured the distance, and we also, because there was light, we could measure the velocity. And so by combining it for that particular event, we could measure this Hubble constant, the rate of expansion of the universe. And that's this fundamental quantity that describes the universe. Yeah. How fast is it expanding today? That's something we wanted to know for a long time. It tells us the age of the universe. And by relating it to other observations, it tells us about dark matter and dark energy. So that's a key quantity. Now, our measurement wasn't that great. It was about 10% or 15%. It's not bad. I mean, it's the first time we're doing this, and we got, you know, you can think of it, we're kind of getting the age to 15%. Yeah, it's not bad. We're trying. Okay, but what's interesting is there are other ways to measure this thing. We talked about it, cosmic microwave background and supernovae. Those different ways of measuring it don't agree.
Interesting.
And that's, you know, what we call, right now it's called attention. So you talk to the supernova people, they're, you know, they're very compelling people. They have Nobel Prizes. They've spent years studying this, and they convince you absolutely. You talk to them, you're like, the value is 72. And you can't doubt it. Like, there's no, they're very persuasive. And then you talk to the people that analyze the cosmic microwave background. They have these beautiful satellites, amazing data. They analyze it. They're really impressive. It's big collaborations, and they come out and it's 67, maybe 68, somewhere in there. Absolutely no question. And their measurement is really precise. It's like 1%. And that's where we are. You have two groups. They both really know what they're doing. They've done an amazing job, and the numbers don't agree.
So my question then would be like how far off in scale are they really? Is it really like a 68 to 72 kind of a thing, or is it vastly different? Like,
right. So because of the sort of precision and accuracy that they're claiming, what you end up with is this is what we call a 3 sigma tension. Okay, which means by pure chance, it's like, there are 1,000 universes, and we're in the, few universes where these things disagree. And then the other 1,000, it all agrees fine. And we just got super unlucky at that, sort of that level. And that seems, I mean, maybe that's the explanation. Like, it's just statistics and we got super unlucky. The measure, you do the measurement, sometimes it's you get off by a little bit. It's just, that's the way it is. But most people don't. That seems like an evil universe where we end up there. So what's interesting is that the way the measurements are being done are very different. The supernovae are measuring the universe today around us, local, and the cosmic microwave background. So, that's today is like 13.8 billion years after the Big Bang, around roughly. And the cosmic microwave background is this baby picture at a few 100,000 years after the Big Bang.
Right.
And so it's very different times. So you're measuring this quantity, inferring this one quantity, this expansion, but you're doing it in totally different times of the universe. And they should agree, but that assumes that we understand what the universe is doing in between.
Progression is, yeah. And
there's a chance that this difference is telling us the universe is doing something super tricky in between that our theories don't account for. And that's new physics. So that would be amazing. So this could be like a hint. Here's a hint that your understanding of cosmology, this this model that we love that basically accounts for the entire history of the universe and everything in it from a fraction of a second after the Big Bang. That whole model, there's this little chink. It's a little something, doesn't quite work. Maybe it's the beginning of a revolution in our understanding, or maybe someone's just making a mistake.
Right.
And that's where this one event, we now have this gravitational wave thing. It's a beautiful way to measure this stuff. And we've done one, and we've already got a 15% measurement. And what this paper, this thing we just worked on, and this is with a former student, Xinyu Chen, who's now a postdoc at Harvard, and a student here, Maya Fischbach. The three of us worked through, okay, here's what we think is going to happen. LIGO and Virgo, they're going to detect some more of these. Here's the rate at which they'll detect them. For each one, here's how well they'll measure this quantity. How quickly do we get to the point where we just answer this question and wrap it up? And, it's on the order of 5 years.
Wow.
And that's
pretty fast, actually.
Fast. Like that's, I can wait around 5 years to kind of revolutionize cosmology. That sounds pretty good.
It'll give you something to do while you're waiting for those satellites to get up in space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So this is kind of the, so this is great. I mean, because it means, and everyone's excited because, this would be a completely different measurement with, there might be problems with it, but basically it's completely independent and it's very clean. And so it'll be very interesting to see where it comes in. And if it comes in at 68 or 72, someone's going to be delighted, someone's going to be crushed. We'll see, or maybe it's going to come in somewhere.
Come in a third point, yes. And then, then we've triangulated some sort of change. If we can,
then we're going to blow everyone's minds.
That's right.
Somewhere else entirely. That's I can't tell if that's the best case or the worst case, but we'll definitely get a lot of that. But that's the thing. In a few years, we're gonna kind of revolutionize these sorts of measurements. We hope. I mean, who knows? I mean, the rates could be low. The machines, maybe they'll stop working. I mean, we don't know, but as if things go as expected, it's going to be really interesting.
In the chat room, someone is asking, would more instruments on Earth help with that? Would it help to compensate for the noise of the Earth, help to get better measurements? I know that there's LIGO and Virgo, and I know there's been talk about and there's been talk of a detector in India and other. Is that making it better?
Yes, so that makes it better. So for all these reasons, so yes, first there are two LIGOs. There's one at Hanford, Washington, one in Livingston, Louisiana. Then there's Virgo, which is in Italy, and those three, are built right now. They're not running. We're kind of tuning them up and trying to make them more sensitive. We'll turn back on in February. Those three, though, they were running in August, and they're awesome. Okay, so there are those three. We're building. The plan is to build another LIGO. So we have, for various reasons, there was an extra LIGO that was being used to do various tests that was boxed up, and it's going to be shipped to India. And India is going to build the tunnel and the state-of-the-art vacuum and everything else, and we'll drop LIGO in there, the instruments, and that'll be LIGO India. And that is progressing, and that's going to be great. And then there's yet another detector being built in Japan. That's called Kagra. And that detector is unlike the LIGOs and Virgo because in two very important ways. One is that one is underground, or really inside a mountain. And the thing which, again, it's not totally, I mean, I'm a physicist, I think about cosmology, I don't do geophysics. It turns out that if you're underground, the seismic noise, the shaking of the Earth goes away, or it's much more quiet.
Oh, interesting.
And
the surface of the Earth is what's vibrating. But if you go underground, it's not vibrating anymore. So there are
you can differentiate then, right? Because if you have, like you're talking about the earthquakes or all the tremors of people walking by, like if these are going to be somewhat localized events, right? So you've got an earthquake even in Japan going on, but they can tell what's because it's not taking place in India or in Louisiana. That noise has nothing to do with beyond. So they're not just triangulating like space as this gravity wave might hit slightly differently, but they're also eliminating noise by having different backgrounds.
Yes, that's right. And the main thing, so we haven't really talked about how sensitive these instruments are. This is another one of these things, there's the black holes that kind of blow your mind, but the fact that we could build these instruments, and I'm a theorist and I don't build things, but but these instruments were built at a time where many people who study this stuff said it's going to be impossible to make something that's this sensitive. It's just not physically possible. And
they were right for a really long time.
And they were right for a really long time. And, I would say they're still right. And I would be one of these people saying it's obviously impossible, except for the fact that it's been done, which is a pretty good proof that it's not impossible, but it should be impossible. And so you probably heard this. This is the thing. I just can't believe this is true. But the sensitivity, the distance we're measuring, is the equivalent of measuring the distance to the nearest star, not our sun, the next nearest star, which is about 4 light years away. So at the speed of light, it takes 4 years to get there. It's pretty far, way outside our solar system. Okay, there's that nearest star. We're measuring the distance to that nearest star, and we notice that it's moving back and forth by the width of a human hair. That's what we're measuring. We're saying, oh my God, that thing is moving by the width of a human hair way over there 4 light years away. Okay, now what we're really measuring is this mirror shaking by the fraction of the size of a proton, but it's that equivalent. I mean, it's just
it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling to me that we can measure that and get rid of the noise.
Yes.
Yeah. But if you only had one detector, it would never be possible.
Yes. So that's exactly right. So now we get to the noise. I mean, it's unbelievably sensitive, but boy, someone sneezes, a mile away and you have a problem. I mean, it's really sensitive. Clouds go overhead and the gravity of the clouds is an issue. I mean, it's just insane.
Cloud.
Okay, so
wait. Can we Justin caught it also. Gravity of clouds is an issue in the measurement.
Yes. We call it Newtonian noise. I mean, it's really sensitive. It's just hard to. So it's anyway, there are lots of examples of things that you can do, like people walking or trucks driving by. There's a freeway, tens of miles away. All that stuff messes you up. Yeah. So the way it's done is just as you said. We have 2 of them or 3 of them or hopefully eventually 5 of them. And the idea is gravitational waves are going to go through everything. Yeah. And they'll show up at the same time, within light travel time between them, very close in time. And we'll see that. And the rest of it, the clouds going overhead, little earthquakes, whatever it is, there's also a lot of noise. I mean, it's so sensitive that any little thing, you have these fibers and lasers, and if the laser kind of just goes up a tiny little bit, it causes all this ringing and stuff goes crazy. All that stuff, you can show this, it just is very unlikely to happen at exactly the same time in all the instruments.
Right.
And that's how you win. And you win by a lot by saying, okay, there's lots of noise, but the noise has to happen all at the same time, everywhere. And that's absolutely key. And so, okay, going back to, so now we have 3 of those, that's good. With 5, we can do an even better job of that. And the 5th one, this Japanese one, it's underground, so that means it shakes less. That's good. It's also cold. So the LIGOs and Virgo are at room temperature. Mm-hmm. And it turns out when something's at room temperature, it's hot. I mean, it has and that means it vibrates a little bit. Yeah. If you can make it much colder, it vibrates less. That would be good. It turns out it's really hard to cool things without getting them vibrating. I mean, just you're gonna, if you attach a refrigerator to it, the refrigerator is vibrating.
Vibrates, yeah.
So that's something they're still working out. But if they can accomplish it, that would be really cool, as it were.
It would be cool.
Just by the virtue of being underground, they're going to be at like 57 Fahrenheit or something.
Yeah, they're trying to go a little
cooler.
Liquid nitrogen or.
Oh, okay. They're going to get real cold.
They're going for a gaming computer cold.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
They're going to max out their system. So I know that we've been talking for a very long time now. I don't want to keep you too long. Just to kind of wrap this up, I would love to know, what is your favorite part of working on these questions of gravitational waves and black holes? What really draws you to it?
Yeah, it's there's this thing about it, and I still have trouble with it. So, I worked on this for, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, and I have written all these papers and really, thought about it a lot, and writing all these equations and computer, all this stuff. And it's, I said, oh, one day we'll detect binary neutron stars, and we'll do this stuff. But it's like a game, like you're doing this stuff. And it's very hard to go from that to thinking, well, there actually are, neutron stars, and the neutron stars are going to crash into each other, at these relativistic speeds. And then you're going to get this whole explosion and a kilonova, and you're going to get the light. And, I wrote all these papers saying, it's going to be so great. We're going to measure the Hubble constant. We're going to measure the size of the universe, do all this stuff. But you actually do it, and it's unbelievable. Like, I can't, it's actually happening. Like, all this stuff, which was just pure thought, and which I think you could reasonably say was complete fantasy. I mean, even, to be honest, even the notion of a black hole is completely absurd. I mean, these things are ridiculous. Like, they're tiny, and there's all this mass, and they're, in extreme gravity, and there's this singularity at the center, which we don't understand, and all this stuff. And yet they're totally real. Like, we've shown that there really are black holes. They crash into each other. They do exactly what the equations predict. It's unbelievable. I mean, and it's happening out there. Like, right now, there are black holes colliding just the way. Anyway, so that part, I'm still having trouble with it, but it seems real.
I have 3 really quick questions, because I know we've got to go. I know we've really got to go. One is, I just wanted to diffuse with help from you the image that many people have, which is a 2-dimensional image of a black hole as a disk funnel shaped thing. These are spherical objects. Yeah. These are not a ripped hole in space. These are spherical objects, like a sun is a sphere or a planet is a sphere.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Now, because they're spheres, they could potentially behave like any other heavenly body. Meaning, my question is, what do you think the chances are that there's a solar system somewhere out there made up entirely of black holes, like a big one in the middle, other ones orbiting around, and maybe even moon satellite black holes orbiting around black holes that are in orbit of the big black hole in the middle?
So black holes all the way down.
All the way.
All the way down. So, yeah. So they're definitely supermassive black holes. There almost certainly are smaller black holes orbiting the supermassive black holes. And, so that's one extreme case. There's every reason to think it happens. And there are also these things called globular clusters, which are, we see them on the sky. It's, aggregations of stars. But those stars form black holes. The black holes sink to the center for various reasons, and you end up with just a ton of black holes just swimming around. Okay. And they'll form pairs and triples.
Because at some point, I mean, beyond the event horizon, to any other object of mass in space, it's like if our moon, it would be a pinprick, I guess. But if our moon was a black hole and could be stable, just for pretend, it could just be orbiting. And we wouldn't know this difference, and would affect the tide, and everything else would be just the same.
For example, the way I usually think about it, but it's exactly the same. So the sun, if right now the sun turns into a black hole, okay, well, we don't think that's going to happen, but okay, fine. Imagine it were to just collapse
2 miles wide, right?
Like, just like that, there it is. It's gone. It's now a black hole. Okay, there'd be an effect. It would go dark. I mean, it's already dark here, so it doesn't matter. But, that would be an effect. But the gravitation wouldn't change at all.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we just, because it claimed itself as a black hole, we get sucked into it. Our orbit would stay the same.
Our orbit,
if we would die,
a year would still take a year. Everything would be the same. except it would be dark
Last question.
And cold.
and cold.
Last question is there is I'm assuming, or I think I've heard, maybe I've read that there's a direct correlation between the mass of a black hole and the area that it takes up, the size of it.
Yes.
What does that then tell us about like the maximum holding capacity of an area of space of energy? Is there a limit to how much we can impact in space? And what does that tell us about space-time? That there is some limit of energy you can gravitationally hold in a bit of space.
Yeah, it's so there's something very interesting here. This is going to take another hour to really get to the bottom. But the
Quick answer.
the basic thing, just as a start, and so if you have the sun and it collapses to a black hole, okay, there's the black hole. It's whatever it is, a couple miles across, let's say. Okay, so there it is. Now let's imagine we have two suns. We take another sun and we also collapse it to a black hole and put them together. Okay, it is twice the size across.
So there is a consistent
growth rate. If you think about it, for anything that you're used to, any matter you're used to, that's not what happens. Because if you take two objects and you put them together, the volume goes up, but the size goes as the cube root. Anyway, so if you think about that, so this is an exercise for the reader. Everyone can go home and think about this. But, if you take an apple and another apple and you put them together and create a bigger apple, okay, that bigger apple is not twice across. The diameter does not go up by a factor of 2.
Oh, right.
But black holes, it does.
Whoa.
Okay, which is really weird. And that leads to all sorts of interesting effects. For example, if you have a really big black hole, this near the edge, the horizon, there's very little gravity. Like, you don't feel it. There's no tidal force. You could, a huge black hole could be sweeping by us right now, and we wouldn't notice the gravity at all, even though we're actually falling into a black hole. It's just a weird thing about black holes. Now, we'd never be able to get out. All the other stuff about black holes still applies, but the local gravity is weak. And
does that mean is there like a giant, what's that Lorentz space where there's that sort of neutrality to the rest of the universe? Is there like a just massive one of those that things can fall into?
Well, one way to think about the Big Bang is that it's related to this. The Big Bang itself, you can think of as being a singularity, and there's a horizon. So that's something we call the cosmic horizon, and then that's impacted by the dark energy, and there are lots of interesting stories there. And again, that's a long
Daniel Kirsten is giving me dirty looks, which means I've asked too many questions and there's too many.
I'm very happy to talk.
No, Daniel, we have to have you back again someday because there's definitely so much more to your knowledge that we want to delve into.
Okay.
Well, Justin is asking so many questions.
Can I ask one really quick one?
It's too late.
You meet somebody like at a party or whatever, not a scientist. They go, "Hi, Daniel, nice to meet you. What do you do for a living?" What do you say?
Yeah, well, so it depends whether I want to have a conversation or not.
Do you say I study ducks on ponds?
I should try that. I basically study ducks on ponds. Big ducks moving quickly. It's once I get going, I usually get excited, and I've definitely been on airplane rides where my seatmate has had enough. Like, you can see their eyes glaze over, and anyway. But no, it's fun. This stuff it's pretty great, and most people are interested. But all you have to do, I've also found, if I just say, "Yeah, I'm a physicist," often that's it. If I say I'm an astrophysicist and I study black holes, that's a little better. Yeah, it's one of those things.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that I go, Really? Tell me more. and I
we're
think
gonna be
many people in our audience do as
this
well.
fight. I have so many questions, and that's when the physicist usually goes,
Yeah.
That's right.
I came here to get away from work.
What am I? Oh, Justin.
No, it's you can probably tell. It's always fun to talk about this stuff. Like, it's pretty cool.
It's
And
wonderful.
it's real. It's not science fiction. It's real.
And I think like you said, that is the most exciting thing, because it really does feel like there is this golden age of physics right now, where we've got the Higgs boson, we've got gravitational waves, we've got these big experiments that are bringing big results and starting to let us peek at these big questions about the universe. And it's
but Daniel, don't say it too loud, because the guys down the hall, they wish they had an experiment. They really figured out how to do one.
There is a little jealousy there, but still, I mean, we are detecting black holes. Everyone likes black holes. They work a lot with black holes. So, I think in the end we all win. That's
absolutely.
They're still talking to me, at least.
So much. And so thank you. Unfortunately, we are going to move on to the rest of our show. You are going to move on to the rest of your evening. Where can people find you to find out more about your research or follow you online?
Yeah, so I have a web page. It's an old style, just normal web page, and you can go there, and then there's some links to various things, and there's my email and ways to contact me.
Wonderful.
And then there are links to all my papers. That's the most important thing. And all this stuff is accessible on the archive, so you can basically read all this stuff for what it's worth.
And we will link to it from our website in case you are interested in following that rabbit hole of physics goodness. Daniel, thank you so much once again for joining us this evening. And we wish you a wonderful night, and just thank you for all of this wonderful information. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. This has been really, really fun.
It really has for us also. All right, everybody, we are going to move on. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back in just a few moments. You know what show this is. We have bird brains ahead and much more on This Week in Science. Stay tuned.
Can't explain things you've heard, more than intuition. A line of reason shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see. The answers lie somewhere within this scattered plot. First assumptions were correct, disprove the rest. It's hot. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only.
Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on This Week in Science tonight. I hope you are enjoying the show, and I hope that you would like to help us out to just keep supporting the show and keep the show going. We do get all of our support from our listeners. If you've noticed, there haven't been any advertisements on this program. It's all us and it's all you. And so we need your support to maintain what we do here. If you would like to help out, here are a few ways. Head over to twist.org. It's the best place to go to find out all the different links and the ways to help us out. First of all, subscribe. If you have not subscribed, go to twist.org, click on the orange subscribe button. It will take you to YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play links where you can subscribe or get friends to subscribe. They'll be able to find the links very easily. Then moving on, do you need a shirt? Do you need a mug? Do you need a calendar? Do you need any of these things? Well, head to our Zazzle store, zazzle.com/thisweekinscience if you want to go directly there. We've got t-shirts. We have got mouse pads. We've got all sorts of goodies with the Twist logo and also artwork from Blair's Animal Corner calendars from many years past. Need a lumbar pillow? That is my favorite. And right now, it looks like there is a 15% off code if you want to go, but the proceeds come back to help This Week in Science. So you can get a new coffee mug if you broke a mug and you need a new mug. Why not grab a TWIS coffee mug and have us with your coffee every day, or tea if you're a tea person, or cocoa, whatever it is. Anyway, proceeds support TWIS, so your purchases go toward helping out the show. If you're not a person for things and stuff, well, you can scroll down the side and click on the donate button. That will take you to a PayPal donation page where you'll be able to choose an amount to support TWIS one time. If you click on any of the show episodes, that will take you to the most recent episode where you can listen, go through the show notes, follow links, and also at the bottom of the page, there are pink buttons where you can use PayPal to donate on a recurring basis. Once every month, just set it, forget it, and donate $2, $5, or $10 a month using PayPal. You can do a similar thing by clicking on the Patreon link at the top of twist.org. Patreon will take you to our patreon.com/thisweekinscience page, where you can click on the red button to become a patron. Become a patron at the level of your choosing, and similarly, set it, forget it, get charged once a month at whatever level you would like. $10 level, we will thank you on the air, and it's only $10 a month. That's basically like a cup of coffee a week, the same kind of thing. So click on that button, become a patron, $10 a month. Do it now. Help out TWIS and help us continue doing what we do. Head on back over to twist.org. That is our main page. And the one last thing I want to tell you about is our calendar. Blair's Animal Corner calendar for 2019 is now available for pre-orders. Pre-order your calendar now. We need to get our orders in so that the pre-orders decide us whether or not we're going to order it for the holidays. So get those orders in rapidement, please. Tout le monde. Order your calendar right now. Get a calendar. And when we get them printed, we will mail them to you. But Blair has put some hard work into some lovely artwork for the calendar for this year. All of you are why we do what we do, how we do what we do. Thank you for your support.
Can't explain the things you've heard with more than intuition. A line reason shows the way to go. New conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things
And we're back. You're listening to This Week in Science. Kiki, what time is it?
It's time for that part of the show that we call This Week in What Has Science Done For Me Lately? What has it done for me lately? Well, me, lots of things. But you, well, we have a letter from Bert Lattimore. Bert has written in and says, Dr. Sanford, first I want to say how much I enjoy TWIS. I listen to several science podcasts, Naked Scientists and Guardian Science from, let's see if I can make this work. Sorry, I'm having from the... There it is. I can read it now. Okay. From the UK, Quirks and Quarks from the CBC, Science Friday, and of course, and Undiscovered Science from the AAAS, Science Talk from Scientific American, plus a couple of 16 to 120 second science sound bites. TWIS is my favorite. Yes. Thank you. I hope you will have more interviews, and I would like to suggest that you create a separate collection of the interviews on the site to make it easier for listeners to find them and to listen to them over again. That is a great idea.
Yep.
We'll see what I can do about that. Thank you very much. Over the years of listening, I remember when you were a doctoral candidate in podcasting from UC Davis.
Oh, yeah.
I learned a great deal about multiple scientific subjects. One that particularly concerns me is my health. I'm 72 years old and am fortunate in that I have no serious health problems so far. I am doing everything I can to help keep my health for as long as possible. I'm particularly concerned about Alzheimer's disease. My mother was dying from it when she was my age now, and she died at 75. Last January on TWIS, I heard about a study that showed that turmeric taken in food, not as a pill, may be effective in preventing Alzheimer's and curing early stages of the disease. Since then, I have been doing myself daily by the simple method of adding it to my food at meals, including putting it on my morning toast. I also do calisthenics, inspired by studies that show that this can help with brain health. And I take long walks, 5 miles plus, several times a week on the steep hillside I live on, during which I listen to TWIS and other podcasts. The only problem I have with the turmeric is it gets on my clothes and stains them yellow. Now, if science could develop a safe and eco-friendly stain remover that would get those stains out, I would be happy.
I'm sure there's an enzymatic detergent out there that could take it.
That would do it. All the best to you, Justin and Blair, and keep up the great work you are doing educating the rest of us about the latest progress in science. Sincerely, Bert.
Nice.
Bert,
Thank you,
you're going to live
Bert.
much longer than any of us.
Yeah, really.
And I appreciate you've spent some of that time on this planet with us.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we all have, all of our time is precious, and to know that you have spent so much of your hours, so many of your hours listening to TWIS over the years. The fact that you were listening to it back when I was at UC Davis, when Justin and I were on the air there. I mean, thank you for all that and for sticking with us for so long. And I'm glad that we have brought you information that has been helpful to you in your life. And thank the scientists for doing the work to allow us to share it in the first place.
And especially thank you for saying that we're your favorite over all of those other very worthy science communication sources.
I know.
That especially is gratifying.
And they are fantastic podcasts, by the way. They are wonderful. So it's wonderful to be in such good company. All of you out there, help us keep this segment of the show going. Send me your letters. What has science done for you lately? What has this podcast done for you lately? No, we don't need ego stroking. Yes, we do.
But I do. Maybe you're good. I have like a constant need for immediate sort of relevant gratification.
We do know this. It's okay. It's all right. So you can email me at Kirsten, KIRSTEN, at thisweekinscience.com, or send me a message on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/thisweekinscience. Yes, follow us on Facebook and send me a message. Let me know. These are the two ways that you can get in touch with me that I am sure to get your note to be able to put it in our schedule and read it for everyone to hear. Be a part of the show. Be a part of celebrating science. We want to hear from you. Write us today. Okay, let's talk about some more science now, huh? Science. So usually I bring a lot of physics and spacey type stories, but I think we got enough of that in the first half of the show. So it's brains and birds that we get to talk about right now. And oh my goodness, the crows. The crows are amazing.
Are they even smarter than we thought?
That can't be again.
Even smarter.
Haven't we reached maximum corvid smartness?
No, we haven't. They're even smarter. The new Caledonian crows, species of crow that we have talked about previously on the show, known for making tools. It's a very social crow species, and in past studies, one particular crow, I believe her name was Betty, she fashioned some tools out of wire, was very handy, able to come up with all sorts of unique shapes to solve tasks. And these crows they've looked at them, and there are a few individuals who seem to do particularly well, but this one species, these new Caledonian crows, have stood out. Well, not this time. In the new study published in Scientific Reports, it's not just fashioning a tool out of wire. This time, what they have done is they have taken components, little bits of things, and put them together to build a tool to solve a task. And there's a video that I'm going to put on while I talk about what they're doing, and it is pretty astounding how these birds are able to construct construct tools. So they're given a situation in which there is food at the back of a box, and there's a door into the box. So it's a kind of and there's kind of a small opening underneath the door. And with a single piece of wire, they can't quite reach the food. So they stick a piece of wire into a straw to make a longer implement to push the food out of the box and to get the food. And it's successful on multiple trials that these crows are quickly and capably able to construct these tools and solve the task in a really quick period of time. And there's one crow in particular who's named Mango, wonderful crow named Mango, who is able to take multiple wires and straws and put them together, 3 or 4 of them together, to solve the task when it's required. So this is called compound tool use. Humans are not known to reliably create compound tools out of components until they're about 4 or 5 years old. This is not something that comes easily even to humans. Humans and apes are the only animals on the planet previously known to create compound tools. And based on archaeological evidence, compound tools only first arrived on the scene of humanity about 300,000 years ago about 300,000 years ago. So
now I do
which
want to
is
say,
pretty recent in terms of cognition.
I do want to say something in defense of human babies or human toddlers, which is that they're not expected to do a whole lot.
No, they're all
very
special. Yeah, so they're
yeah,
like
so I
very-
feel like this is an unfair scale again of using human toddlers who are not even asked to be able to walk upon birth, whereas like deer have to get up and start walking immediately, that sort of thing. So that's unfair. We should leave human babies out of the picture because we
Leave
coddle them.
alone.
Leave them alone. Leave the babies alone. Well, we coddle them, and it's a thing. It's part of the way that we evolved anyway.
I don't think there's a judgment being made that the crows are better than babies. I think that this is an attempt to give an analogy or a comparison, right? So before we said that crows were as smart as 3-year-old humans. And now we're saying maybe it's
5-year-olds
or 5-year-olds.
Yeah, I still think that's an unfair scale. However,
it's different intelligences too, so it's not really comparable.
However, the fact that it's chimps, humans, and these ravens who can do the compound, that's the story. And I think that puts them above an intelligence, tool use intelligence above so many other life forms on the planet that alone is enough.
So to your point, Kiki, earlier, talking about kind of the evolutionary history of this behavior in apes, there's no sure way, unless we found a fossilized corvid with a compound tool, to know really when this probably happened for them, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah. And it's
So
the kind of thing they would be creating wouldn't be something that would be in the archaeological record. There's no fossil record of tool use by other animals that we're aware of, right?
Twigs don't hold up super well in the fossil record.
Right?
So I get that.
Yeah, and so Fada is asking here, do I think that crows were earlier on in the study? Did they communicate their experience when they rejoined their community so that those after knew how to make the tools? They have shown that these crows do pass on their tool use ability. However, in these crows, they are kept separately so that they don't teach each other. They're all naive before going into this test situation.
Oh, well, that's clever.
So these crows didn't learn it from each other. Each of them figured it out for themselves. And so this is unique intelligence, not a learned trait.
Wow.
This is just they saw a problem, saw things that were available for them to solve the problem, and they used them to solve the problem. So this is a real demonstration of these crows' intelligence and not just their ability to learn. And so it's mind-boggling. Whereas, yes, like you said, Justin, whereas once before it was just humans and apes doing this, now we add the crows. We have more company in this field of complex cognition related to tool
somebody
use.
needs to make the movie Planet of the Crows.
That's right.
Yes,
we do. Yes,
It
we
was
do.
called The Birds by
yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock.
That was
That's right.
fantastic. Yeah, it's a very nice movie.
That's like a little scarier than I would hope to go with the Planet of the Birds, but yes, I get it. Yes, and as I'm being told in the chat room, there are multiple forms of intelligence. So tool use is not the only indicator. There is empathy.
But to be fair, we understand how far that takes you.
Tool
and it
use
can be
takes you
pretty
farther.
far. It can
Yeah.
be pretty far. Okay, dolphins may have an emotional intelligence that we might respect. Tool use, and they use some tools. Yeah, but
Sponges.
compound.
Yeah.
Now I want to see dolphins do that compound tool use. Let's figure
bet
out
they
how to
can.
make that
It's one of those
happen.
questions.
Right?
Once you
Well-
know what you're looking for, does it pop up in other places?
Yes.
Yeah,
Can you
and
say that?
actually, I think there's probably something that we could suss out of the behavior that we've seen from dolphins that we could contextualize as a compound tool, like the bubble ring thing to manipulate stuff. Like they've got
Right.
all sorts of. So we're looking at one specific aspect of intelligence. You're right.
But still, it's pretty cool.
It's
very cool.
These birds are smart. Absolutely. All right, Justin, tell me a story.
Oh, I was supposed to bring stories. I don't.
Mhm.
Tell me what killed the dinosaurs. I need to know. or not.
Oh,
Tell me
okay.
something
So the
else.
dinosaurs. This story's a little old. It's not didn't happen this week. It was 66 million years ago.
Oh, okay. Many
an
weeks ago in
asteroid-
science, yeah.
An asteroid the size of Davis, perhaps, crashed into the Earth. This had a deleterious effect. It was the beginning of the end of the dinosaurs, and it left a scar. It left a noticeable scar on the Earth. This scar is still out there. It's now several miles underground. It's more than 115 miles wide. It's the Chicxulub, which lies underneath the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. So it's deep down in there. It's the best preserved large impact crater on the Earth. And currently it's buried beneath a half mile of rocks. It's also the only crater on the planet with a mountainous ring of smashed rocks inside its outer rim. This is called a peak rim. Now, this is not unique to all craters, but it's just unique to craters on the Earth. So this is something that has been viewed on other heavenly bodies. So, but how these features actually formed is a bit of a debate. There's a new study in Nature that shows they're a product of insanely intense vibrations that made rock flow as if it were a liquid for a few minutes after the impact. So, decent sized, normal, everyday asteroid hits the Earth. It leaves the typical bowl-shaped crater. What we sort of might. If you've been to, there's somewhere in Arizona, there's a really big crater site. Beautiful. It's big bowl, big round bowl in the ground, big dent. But if the asteroid is bigger, the resulting crater can be many, many, many miles deep. And at some point, that becomes unstable as a crater, and it collapses upon itself. And this is quotey voice of Jay Mellish, a professor of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Science at Purdue University. For a while, the broken rock behaves as a fluid. There have been a lot of theories proposed about what mechanism allows fluidization to happen, and now we know it's really strong vibrations, shaking the rock constantly enough to allow it to flow. This mechanism is being called acoustic fluidization.
Oh,
Yeah, which if you think of like a GAC type material or a Newtonian material,
a
you can,
non-Newtonian fluid.
and you got like a speaker under it and it's doing weird things, but you don't typically picture that happening with large rock formations, right? This is pretty intense. And this is also what allows the ring of mountains and the crater's center to rise within minutes of this asteroid strike. The craters are essentially the same on all terrestrial planets: Earth, Mercury, Venus, Mars, the Moon. But those ones are harder to study when they're out in space because they are out there in space. It's really hard to get a really good read. So the Chicxulub crater also isn't easily accessible. Been buried for 66 million years. So the International Ocean Discovery Program, a group that is within the International Continental Scientific Drilling Program, did the only thing they could think of. They dug. Side note, being part of an international scientific drilling team also means that you have a tendency to seek out problems in which drilling is the only option to solve it. There's a correlation.
Let's drill that. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, they like the Crow study. They were like, we're going to pass on that one. There's no opportunity for massive drilling involved. We're just going to let somebody else work on that one. The team drilled a core 6 inches diameter, a mile deep into the earth, which is not easy drilling. Going a mile deep is insane. They collected rock, that some of which was shattered, some of which was partly melted by the impact, and in examining fracture zones and patterns through their core that they pulled out, the team found an evolution in the vibration sequence that would allow the debris to flow. These findings help us understand how impact craters collapse and how masses of rock behave in fluid-like manner in other circumstances, such as landslides and earthquakes, Milish says. Towns have been wiped out by enormous landslides where people thought they were safe, then discovered that rock will flow like liquid when some disturbance sets a big enough mass in motion. The extinction of the dinosaurs was probably not directly caused by like the crater collapse event. There's all sorts of external effects that impacted them later. But this, they say, is going to give them information on understanding impacts throughout other heavenly bodies and other planetoids when they're witnessing, perhaps, or looking at craters on other planets or heavenly bodies.
Yeah, and it's probably in some places trying to know when you're looking at the surface of a heavenly body, a planet, a moon, what have you, and it looks like water's been flowing on it at one point in history. Was it water, or was it simply that the factors related to the impact of this particular crater led to the something that appears to look like water at this point in time?
Fantastic point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like being able to differentiate between what looks like water and what is water or was water is very important.
Right. Because you're seeing the after effects of what you identify as a flow, which yeah, and it does. I mean, this is also the tricky thing then, because whereas ice more likely to form, but in a crater where it can be shadowed part of the time, and it does also seem to be where we're like, oh, we found a crater that might have had water in it, and there is a correlation there. And
Yeah, and also being able to understand like where Robert Bigelow's saying liquefaction may occur, or what towns may be at risk for landslides in the future. Will avalanches or volcanic eruptions lead to certain areas beyond what is the normal flow zone for a volcanic eruption? Are there other areas that could be disrupted because of this shake, rattle, and roll, and the ground turned to liquid liquid dirt and you're dead. No.
And my next story, which is also my last story because it's the only two stories I brought. The internet is bigger than it's ever been before. And the way that we access the internet is faster than it's ever been before. And the files that we want to access on the internet are bigger than they've ever been before. So the internet essentially can bog down just like it always has.
Except for when I was on dial-up. That was really slow.
Yeah, but
I
I
will
will
say
say.
yesterday I had to download a video and it took like 10 seconds. It took forever.
right?
No, I'm
These
kidding.
things are taking way too long. All of this for at least some point until we figure out much bigger files to need to access. All of this is about to change. Bandwidth breaking new technology claims it will be 100 times faster than the fastest internet connection available now.
And it'll be 100 times as expensive from the cable companies.
Well, it is kind of odd that it just shows up after net neutrality is taking a nosedive.
Yeah.
But okay. So our best technology, broadband fiber optics, they are carrying information on pulses of light, traveling at the speed of light through these optical fibers. But these pulses have these unsightly gaps between the pulses. And the way that the light is encoded at one end, processed at the other, all of these things affect data speed. How many pulses, how many other people's pulses, all of this affects it. So this is the world first nanophotonic device. It was just unveiled in Nature Communications. It encodes more data and processes it much faster than conventional fiber optics by using a special form of twisted light. Dr. Howard Wren from Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, School of Science, co-lead author of the paper, says the tiny nanophotonic device they have built for reading twisted light is the missing key required to unlock super fast ultra band communications.
That's right, because we could twist light, but it was the reading of it that was hard.
That's kind of like also like this sort of side fun thing. Like they invented this ability to transmit information in twisted light, but they hadn't quite figured out how to read it at the other end.
How to untwist it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so what they had some time ago. They did have a reader for it. But the reader they described as being the size of a table, which I think your average, or maybe you're a slightly above average gamer would have still gone for. They're like, oh, I can use it as a TV stand for my gaming console. Like, fine, yeah, I'll bring it. But it was also like insanely expensive. So this time they've gone through and they've gotten it to the point where it will fit within the same size of a fiber optic communications net, right? So this is
wow.
This is going to have a massive increase in our ability to transmit this information is exciting. So, but this latest technology carries data on light waves that have been twisted into a spiral to increase their capacity, which we need another interview with a physicist to explain what they mean by twisted light. But it's a state of orbital angular momentum, OAM, which I don't understand that either. But I do like the idea of 100 times faster internet coming in the future because it's sort of true. Like as our technology has progressed, I mean, even during this show, if we had this internet speed doing this show 5-10 years ago, this would have been the most lightning fast, crispest, cleanest. But now, the video resolution is better, the audio resolution is better, and there's so many more people uploading, downloading, streaming information at the same time that we're on the internet, things can actually bog down. Things can be slow. Things can take a little while to download. And we were looking for bigger data sets, larger information.
Yeah. HD video, people. Let's make it happen.
HD video, or like terabytes, petaflops of, genomic information that needs to get read.
Yeah, fluidity flams of information for sure.
Let's all start downloading data from CERN and cracking through that, right, on our computers. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about this twisted light kind of in the same way that that Daniel from the interview was talking about strings for how the dimensions of the string theorists talk about. They get smaller than our own by the folding and the twisting, and in that you can have more information in smaller amounts of space, or in space-time, it's more space in space. But in terms of this, it's twisting of the light so you can have more information carried by the light.
Which,
down a
again,
cable,
somebody's
down
going to have to
down a
explain
fiber.
exactly what is meant by twisting.
Exactly what happened.
Because
polarization, I'm
I
sure.
can picture it, but I know it doesn't make sense, the cartoon in my head. I know that cannot be reality. That's just, it's got to be something else.
Well, something that may make sense right about now.
Carbon reduction is led by Liang-Shi Li at Indiana University.
You're playing an old episode?
Oh, that's what it was. I was like, what's going on? Because that just kind of kept playing. I was wondering
why
you were talking.
Not moving, no.
Why is Justin talking some more? I figured you got my segue, but never mind. Something that might make sense right now. Blair's Animal Corner.
Loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels.
What you got, Blair?
I have some parental advice from the animal kingdom. First, from chimpanzees. Things can get ugly in a chimpanzee group. The groups can be pretty large, 20 to 150 members. They can be all female, all male, smatterings of both. And in the groups that are kind of mixed company, there's infanticide as part of the culture. So there are males that will target and kill baby chimps. And so a new study from the University of Kent wanted to see how females can anticipate and react to males that have infanticidal tendencies. They examined the behavior of female chimpanzees in Uganda, where chimps are particularly prone to committing and suffering infanticide. And they picked in particular a period of kind of social unrest. It was a period in which a mid-ranking male was rising in rank. So we know from other species of animals, especially things like herd animals where there's one male and a bunch of females. For example, lions, giraffes, males can benefit from infanticide when they suddenly take charge of a group of women, a group of females, because they want to get rid of the babies that are potentially suppressing females from going into heat and kind of hurry up with getting their genetic representation going quicker, right? So they don't want to waste resources on animals that are not related to them. They're like, come on, time to go get me some heirs, basically, right? So the reason this is kind of different with the chimps is that there's not one male and a bunch of females. It's a bunch of different animals of a bunch of different ranks. And so we know that rank is, however, linked to mating access in chimps. And a male who rises quickly, that means he's most likely surrounded by babies he's unlikely to have fathered. So it would stand to reason that a male who rises in rank is suddenly a threat to mothers and babies. And what they found was that chimps know about this. I would say not too surprisingly, the mothers, specifically those with younger, more vulnerable infants, kind of stayed away from the rank rising male during instability in the group. They also found that the females preferred to associate during that time with males of stable rank. So their implication here is that their association with the high-ranking stable male protects against some of that negative behavior. So this supports the hypothesis that strategy by the males do result in more mating opportunities, but male chimps, as they are described as great politicians, as they use complex alliances to compete for high rank. This also shows that females are just as tuned into the social environment, social stature, and they watch from the sidelines, extremely sensitive to changes within those ranks.
Well, that would make sense. I mean, they're being affected themselves. I mean, it's not like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm just going to hang out here and wait for some food. No, like their lives are affected by those politicians, so they're paying attention.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
kids just need to like learn the concept of a benevolent uncle. Like,
Right.
what? Like, it's the. I mean, the selfish gene. I don't even think is enough to quite explain this. If you're now the top of you're the top banana in the chimp world, it seems like you'll have plenty of opportunities. Like, there's no need to. I don't know.
There's
But
no
they-
guarantees in nature, and you don't want to wait a whole cycle or several. With great apes, sometimes it's years before they go back into estrus, the ability to conceive. So,
Right. Yeah, because once they have one, they parent that child for years sometimes.
yeah.
And they're not just every monthly, they don't have just a monthly cycle like humans. They're not constantly on like mice or bunnies.
Yeah, and
that
giving
makes
parental
sense.
care, breastfeeding, those sorts of things actually suppress the ability to conceive as well. So the second they kind of get rid of that barrier, there we go. So
Yeah.
so anyway,
I guess that would keep chimp populations pretty low if, you know, if the hierarchy of males keeps changing, then
yes, but what this study is telling us is that the females are aware of those changes and are often able to avoid that bad behavior. It still happens, but it would appear a lot less than it would otherwise if they weren't paying attention.
The males just got to do whatever they wanted to.
Yeah. So mama knows best.
Mama
In
does.
another study about parenting in the animal kingdom, in burying beetles, they were picked because, a lot of different types of animals have different parenting structures where the females take care of them and the males leave, vice versa. Sometimes both parents take care of the babies. Most insects, the babies have to fend for themselves. Sometimes they'll do a good job of laying their eggs near a food source or in a protected area, but other than that, it's usually you're on your own. Well, in burying beetles, both parents tend to stick around until they're young or old enough to leave the nest. They feed, they groom, they protect them from predators, and they keep the nest clean to prevent growth of bacteria and fungi. About half of the burying beetle families in the wild have both parents staying in the nest to look after them. In 39% of families, the dads leave and the moms stay. And in about 3% of families, the moms leave and the dads stay. So the question in this study was, are two parents better than one? What is and is there a benefit to having both parents there? Because you would guess, since this is such a different strategy from other insects, that there is. So they brought this into the laboratory. They had 3 types of nests: a single male parent, a single female parent, and a pair with the male and female together. And what I think is really interesting is they wanted to make sure that all parents had the same workload. They weren't getting overloaded. So they gave each single parent half as many young as they did for the pairs. So the young per parent ratio was the same across the board. They predicted that offspring in single parent and two parent families would do equally well unless there was a hidden cost or benefit of having both parents together. And what they found was, surprise, they do better in two parent families. When they were raised by two parents, they performed better. They were larger when they left the nest, and they were more likely to survive to adulthood. But this is where it gets interesting. There was no measurable difference in the amount of care received per offspring between the single parent and two parent families. So they do not know why this is successful. The other interesting finding from this study is that in two parent households, the males exploit the female partners by doing less work than they would do when they're on their own. Females do more work than they would do on their own. So also in the lab,
the human context.
in the lab, they had very close to the same numbers as well, that even when they had both parents together, around 35% of the groups had the males abandon the nest and about 5% had the females abandon the nest. So the numbers were consistent with the wild. So there's lots of conversation about how this could be extrapolated to humans, as it sounded like perhaps, Justin, you were interested to do.
I didn't even hear the word beetle once.
Wait, these are beetle? Huh?
The question here is, well, there's really two questions. One is, what is it about the two-parent household that sets these beetles up for a better, more successful life ahead? And how can that kind of be quantified? And the second question, the next step for this set of researchers in particular, is to repeat this experiment in other animal species among a bunch of different groupings to see whether this two-parent versus single-parent is beneficial across the board, and maybe it's measurable there.
I would assume it's the two beetle income, but
two beetle income, yeah, that's
Yeah, it's interesting, especially with the male and the female when they're co-parenting, having different amounts of work, where the male's doing less, the female's doing more. But at the same time, they're still both having input, yet the offspring are getting the same amount of care.
But
is
just a little bit of
the parents aren't working as hard?
Enough. Obviously, the little bit that papas contribute is enough to make a huge difference.
But only if the female is already there.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah. But you notice if it's mostly single mother beetles, right?
Yes.
So just a little bit, that Papa does makes all the difference.
And it probably is so
thankful for the massive impact through a little bit of interaction, taking them out to the movies once in a while.
Yeah. I wonder if what's going on there is that if just the fact that the parents are not having to do all the work themselves, they're not overtired. And so even though the amount of care is the same, the quality of the care is different.
Or the stress level of
that's what I was wondering too. If there's
because that's got to be taken into account.
If there's a stress hormone output that's stressing out the babies, that's causing them not to grow as much.
You know what? This would be a lot easier if you didn't eat as much.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, this is a perfect segue to my quick stories for the end of this show. Speaking of stress hormones, there is a study that came out this last week out of the Max Planck Institute for Chemistry. Researchers were looking for, trying to figure out if there was some kind of signal that is released into the air by human beings when we get stressed out, with an idea of maybe coming up with an objective measure with which to rate movies.
Wait, what?
Hold on, you lost me right there.
I know. So they took about 13,000 audience members and screened 11 different movies over about 135 movie screenings. So these groups of audiences watching movies together. And in the air system, they put a mass spectrometer to look for compounds, volatile compounds that are emitted by people in the audience, to see if any one chemical that gets emitted from people into the air could be used as a measure of people's stress.
So is this horror films? Are they trying to see how effective a horror film is?
Well, the idea is that you could look at just about any movie, from, a horror movie to a kid's animated film that's not scary at all, and have screenings to find out how people respond. And higher levels of this compound, they discovered isoprene. It's a compound that we release when we get stressed and we clench our muscles and we use our muscles and fidget in our seats. And so this chemical seemed to be released more often in periods of emotional tension.
I feel like this would be put to better use in office buildings instead of like a carbon monoxide sensor. They would just like beep and be like, everybody's got to go home.
Out.
Chronic stress levels, everybody go home. It's happy hour time.
It's happy hour. Yeah, so they're gonna keep looking for other chemical signals that enter the air that could be indicative of different emotional states that people may be entering. But this is one that they have determined, and it concentrations of it correlate with the movie industry's voluntary classification of films, and so could be a potential way to rate movies, as opposed to listening to the number of swear words or violent acts.
Okay. Interesting.
I feel like my levels would be the highest watching Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Probably
That's
that kind of comedy. It's like,
whatever, violent stuff. But an awkward Larry David, like long prolonged, like I'm like definitely. I've actually clenched chairs and
I gotta go
during that show where I would never have in like a dumb horror movie or whatever.
Larry, I hope you're listening.
I hope you're listening. That's right. This is proof of concept study testing human volatile organic compounds as tools for age classification of films in PLOS 1. And then my last story for the hour is that, hey, move over, weed. Moss might be better.
What?
What? Yes.
Tell me more.
A species of liverwort apparently has a compound in it that was discovered around 1994 by a Japanese phytochemist named Yoshinori Asakawa. He discovered this substance that he named paratetanine, and this product looks very similar to THC, the active compound in marijuana. However, it binds it. They did a bunch of tests, and this group, they discovered it binds to cannabinoid receptors very similarly to THC. However, it has less of a psychoactive effect, and it is very effective at reducing inflammation. So, in terms of compounds that could be better for medicinal purposes, this compound, paratetanine, may be one that researchers are going to be looking at going into the future as a replacement for THC compounds.
Yeah, and not for nothing, we all have cannabinoid receptors.
We
accordingly, people
use them accordingly. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's really interesting. I mean, these the researchers, they say it's astonishing that only 2 species of plants separated by 300 million years of evolution produce psychoactive cannabinoids.
So what would be the evolutionary reason for that?
Wait.
Why? So that sounds like convergent
Why ask
evolution,
why?
but
Why ask
why would you?
Why ask
Yeah.
why?
What is feeding on these plants? What are
Yeah,
these
that's
plants
it.
doing for signaling? What are these compounds what are the purposes of these compounds in the plants originally?
Can I throw out a weird funny thing that just occurred to me in this moment? You know how we think of the sort of chemical natural arms race of being between this moth and that bird or this, what if they're aimed at humans? like why can't we join into this arms race? Why can't there be a plant that's like, okay, they're gonna try to eat us, but we want them to just like take a long chill period.
Forget what they were doing.
Just forget what they were doing
Maybe
and
they'll
wander off the
off
other
and forget
direction.
where they were going to hunt or gather.
What was I doing? I don't know.
No, I found this plant, but I don't remember where I found it. I was gathering, and I don't know what I did with it. Like, why not? Like, we constantly are reporting on these sorts of
Yeah.
things.
All right, Blair.
Yes.
Give me the last couple of stories.
Well,
Yes.
speaking of getting nice and sleepy, something that lizards and we have in common is that we both experience 2 different sleep states. So this was a confirmation of a 2016 study on bearded dragons, now done with tegus, one of my favorite types of lizards. They did find, in fact, lizards have 2 sleep states, but where it gets interesting is that looking at the behavioral, physiological, and cerebral parameters of these sleep states, they found that the tegus have different cerebral and ocular activity from us. So they actually have what we consider different from waking hour ocular and neuronal movements during REM sleep. So their sleep, they have their 2 sleep states, but they're way different from our sleep states. So now we have to ask, what other animals dream? What other animals go through REM sleep? And do they do it the same way? There you go.
Yeah.
And this has to
I
be
feel like lizards just dream about the doors. I don't know why.
But I think to know that lizards, which are very distantly related to us, that they have REM sleep, it's either convergent evolution or it's conserved.
Yeah. Well, considering all of the things that sleep does for us, it helps us heal, it helps us store long-term memory.
Every
Makes
organism goes through circadian rhythms.
Yeah, but I'm kind of surprised by lizards. Like, I would expect like naked mole rats, anything that burrows, because there's something about the protectiveness of a burrowed animal where you feel secure enough to just relax entirely into sleep and have the economy to dream. Whereas if you're
Justin,
dwelling kind of creature, you've got to still like keep one eye open and hope that nothing eats you.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're burrowed. There are things always trying to eat you. It just doesn't
also
matter.
remember, there are animals that sleep unihemispherically.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter if you're safe or not. Everybody has to sleep, even if it's only half of your brain.
They have to sleep, but with one eye open. This is what I mean. I feel like that luxury of dreams, right, must come from somebody who's like, I would assume that bears sleep really well. Like, I would assume that bears dream, because bears like, hey, even if something wakes me, I'm still going to be a bear. I can sleep half the winter long. I'll be fine. If you're a prey animal, I doubt you have time to dream.
Everything sleeps. Everything finds
sleeps, but do they dream perchance?
It looks like probably yes. To answer your question. My last story, my favorite story from the week, but it's just a quick snippet, is that jackdaws know the difference between animate and inanimate objects, or at least we think so. How do we know this? By putting remote controls on a dead snake and also a stick and putting them in jackdaw nests.
Wait,
Jackdaws were always scared.
what's
when-
a jackdaw? I don't
It's
know
a
what a
bird.
jackdaw
It's
is.
a bird.
It's
It's
a
a
bird.
birdie. So they were always scared by a moving thing, but they were significantly more scared by a stick moving because it was not anticipated and unusual.
Yeah, ghost.
Yeah, I guess if I were to see a moving
Natural.
stick with no explanation for why that stick was moving, yeah.
Absolutely.
You don't expect the unexpected.
There you go.
Even if you're a jackdaw.
Even if you're a jackdaw. It's hard to expect the unexpected. But you know what's not unexpected? The fact that we have reached the end of our show. We've gone through all of our stories. Thank you to everyone for listening for our show. Thank you to Fada for helping with show notes and descriptions over on YouTube and for social media help. Thank you to Goldazader Gord McLeod over on our chat room for moderating there. Thank you to Identity 4 for recording the show. And thank you to our guest, Dr. Daniel Holz, for explaining gravitational wave astrophysics to us this evening. It's still, like he said, it's really hard for the human mind to wrap itself around this kind of stuff. And it really is, but he did a great job of helping us work through it. And we hope
We
that
need
we
him
can
on
get him
every
back
week
again.
for the next year.
Just
to,
forever.
get to
Did
the
you just-
end of this story.
That's right. Thank you, all of you. It is now my turn to thank our Patreon sponsors. And I would like to thank Paul Disney, G. Burton Lattimore, Richard Onemus, Ed Dyer, Ken Hayes, Harrison Prather, Charlene Henry, Joshua Fury, Steve DeBell, Alex Wilson, Tony Steele, Craig Landon, John Ratnaswamy, Mark Mazzaros, Jack, Matthew Litwin, Jason Roberts, Bill K, Bob Calder, Time Jumper 319, Eric Knapp, Richard Brian Condren, Dave Neighbor, Aiden Jeff, Paul Ronovich, Dave Wilkinson, Ben Bignell, Richard Porter, Jacqueline Boyster, Noodles, Kevin Reardon, Christoph Zuknurek, Ashish Pants, Ulysses Adkins, Sarah Chavez, Artyom, Rick Ramis, Paul, John McKee, Jason Olds, Brian Carrington, Christopher Dreyer, Lisa Suzuki, Jim Drapeau, Greg Riley, Sean Lamb, Ben Rothig, Steve Lessman, Kurt Larson, Rudy Garcia, Marjorie, Gary S., Robert, Greg Briggs, Brendan Minish, Christopher Rappin, Flying Out, Aaron Luthen, Matt Sutter, Mark Hessenflow, Kevin Parachan, Byron Lee, and E.O. Thank you for your support on Patreon. We do appreciate everything that you do for us. And if you out there, if you want to be part of this community and help us out on Patreon, you can find information by heading to twist.org, where there are links to all of these various things. And there's lots of things. Tell your friends about Twist. That would be super helpful. Next week, we are taking a week off.
Wait,
It is-
what?
It is Halloween next week.
So?
It's Wednesday, and
Who cares? Oh, did we talk about this before? Because Blair's doing like a facepalm thing, which
It was your idea. It was you and Kiki
oh
said that you guys have to take,
right.
the children to the
I
trick or
forgot I have
treating and
kids. I forgot I had kids. Yeah, I'm busy that night.
what are you, a burying beetle? What's going on?
Make it on
that's
Halloween.
right. He's out of there. He just forgot about that. I
Jeez.
just did, not helping out.
Well,
You're making me edit. That's what you're doing right now. This is me editing tomorrow.
no, this is the quality part of the show.
This is the part that
this is
nobody
the
gets
quality
to
part.
hear on the
This is the
podcast.
part that everybody loves about the show.
Oh.
Honestly.
No. Next week, we are taking a break. It is Halloween here in the United States on the 31st, and there is trick-or-treating that must be done with children. So I do hope that those of you who have kids and are out trick-or-treating have a wonderful Halloween evening. Those of you that are not, I hope that you find a science-y activity to keep you busy or a good book to keep your brain warm. We will be back in the beginning of November and cannot wait to bring 2 weeks worth of science to you starting in November. We are counting down to our 700th show. You know that?
Wow.
Counting down. This was show 693. We are now 6 shows away from 700.
Wouldn't it be 7?
700. We're
Right.
almost members of the 700 Club. All right. Once again, in 2 weeks, we'll be broadcasting live online on a Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Pacific time. You can catch us live on twist.org/live or our YouTube channel. And we do hope that you will watch and join our chat room. But if you don't, it's okay because it's all archived. So you can go to twist.org and find links to all these things.
Thank you for enjoying the show. Twist is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science in your iTunes directory. Or if you have a mobile type device, you can look for Twist, the number 4 Droid app in the Android marketplace, or simply This Week in Science in anything Apple marketplacey.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes will be available on our website. That's www.twist.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts or other listeners.
Or you can skip all of that and just contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, Justin at twistminion@gmail.com, or Blair at blairbaz@twist.org. Just put Twist, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, your email will be immediately spam filtered into oblivion. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at Twist Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jacksonfly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here in November, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you have learned anything from the show, please remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. This week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news, that what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just get understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. And This Week in Science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma. Got the eye. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. I've got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This Week in Science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science.
And that is the end of another episode of This Week in Science. We move on. Bing bong, bing bong.
Bing bong, bing bong.
Bing bong, bing bong.
Bing bong, bing bong.
Who's the friend you like to know? How'd that go? Bing bong, bing bong. I love
I
it.
don't remember.
The movie
I just remember crying.
crying so much, all the emotions. Oh my gosh. Good night, everybody. No, okay. What was I going to talk about? I had something to talk about. Trick-or-treating. That'll be fun. So here, okay, two things related to trick-or-treating that I came across. This just adds to the picture of what a disaster our country is right now.
Uh-oh.
Let me just tell you. So came across, there's like all these, this one area, where was it? It was somewhere on the East Coast, I think, somewhere on the East Coast. And they had all these local regulations for trick-or-treating where your trick-or-treating ends at 8 o'clock. Like it's like a curfew at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
No later. No, you cannot trick-or-treat after 8 o'clock. And then it's like, because you have to have a law about that or something. And then you cannot trick-or-treat if you're a teenager. 13 and over, no trick-or-treating.
You can be fined and you can end up in jail.
Yes. You can be fined and end up in jail. I mean, I understand. Okay, you're 21, going trick-or-treating on your own or with your friends, maybe a bit much, right? But I mean, would you rather a teenager be trick-or-treating or,
Drinking?
maybe
Yeah.
or out drinking and partying?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
Please come trick-or-treat. I'll give you some candy.
For real. I definitely trick-or-treated longer than I should have. I definitely did until I was probably
trick-or-treated.
a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
But I did it around Noe Valley in San Francisco, and there were some adults that were like, get out of here. And we were like, fair enough. And we just like turned and left. But it's, we had fun conversations with the people who are out on their stoops giving out candy. And it was a fun thing that I did as a group of like 8 people. Nice.
Yeah. And I mean, should it be, you only get to celebrate Halloween by going to adult parties that are like, drunk fests if you're, an adult, or you get to do it if you're a kid or a parent because you have to go with your child to go trick-or-treating.
Right.
And that's it. That's it. That's the only people who get to celebrate Halloween.
Yeah.
Just like,
not
like,
cool.
And you can only do it until 8 o'clock.
Like, what if you're on your way to a party in your costume? And someone's like, you're trick-or-treating. I'm going to take you in, taking you downtown.
Like, the candy I brought from no, it's my candy. Okay, and then the second thing is I was listening to the radio, and there was this one woman who is saying that she decides whether or not someone is too chubby, and if they are too chubby, she says she doesn't have any candy.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, that person.
So there are people out there who are making judgments about who is too chubby or not chubby and who gets to have candy, and that this person can have candy and that person
she can stick her head right up a pumpkin as far as I'm concerned.
Like, seriously. So all together, we're looking at these laws and regulations and people's judgments, and I'm just like, what is Halloween turning into?
Can you imagine
it's just a picture of what's wrong with America right now.
Can you imagine if, like, heaven forbid, somebody was like, you can't have those Christmas lights on past 10 p.m.
Right? No lights, no Christmas lights.
Right.
Turn them off.
Right. Or like, oh, you don't ever go to church, so you can't have a manger scene in your front yard.
Wait, talk about trick or treating, and I'll tell this, and I've told this story a bunch of times on the show, and still to this day, nobody believes me. But there were two guys in the school system around my age. One was named Les, one was named Moore. Their last name was Plack, and their father was a dentist. And if you trick or treated at the Plack house, you got a toothbrush.
Yeah, sure. Fine.
This was
makes sense.
This was like, and in fact, my toothbrush from I think the 5th grade to the maybe
Halloween.
Was from Halloween.
You used the same toothbrush for a year?
Blair. This is one of these things that too, like this is a whole other direction where I talk about
you know how long you're supposed to use those?
Where I discuss how much a healthy microbiome of the mouth supports proper mouth health versus your no, we need to eliminate and keep changing the microflora to the point where we can't even predict the outcomes.
Just dry heaving.
It's so gross. No, it's not the microbiome in your mouth. It's the stuff that doesn't belong in your mouth that spit kills, but lives on the toothbrush because it's not in your mouth anymore. Okay. You take it out of your mouth.
Okay. Oh God.
So, what is your mouthwash? What is your mouthwash?
I don't use mouthwash because I brush my teeth twice a day and I floss every morning. And my dentist and every dentist I've ever had says you don't need mouthwash.
Okay.
If
Can I
you take care of it
properly? Can I say you do have the most beautiful teeth of anybody I have ever met? This is true.
Such a great
smile. And I have to admit I have yellow, crooked, no cavities, but yellow, crooked teeth. And you have the most beautiful teeth I've ever seen. So I would defer anybody, if you're going to take advice on dental hygiene, chances are Dr. Justin, not a real doctor, is not the person to listen to.
Well, Goldizator in the chat room says, Blair Bass replaces her brush every day. Not quite that often.
That might be true.
No,
I
do it about once a month, which is generally what you're supposed to do.
What?
So like, toothbrush subscription brands and things. They send you a new toothbrush every month.
Once a month?
No, they just want you to do that. You're supposed to replace your toothbrush every 60 to 90 days.
So 2 months. You're probably right. I probably do 2 months. I probably do 2 months. Yeah. I do between 1 and 2 months, like when the bristles start to get kind of
the bristles shouldn't be all smushed and frayed.
Yeah.
So wait, Kiki, you're saying you should replace it every third use. And Blair is saying you should use it in between using it? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
For brushing. I'm just going like this.
That's right.
That doesn't make any sense.
Oh my God. 3% of the Pacific trash gyres composed of toothbrushes, according to Identity 4.
Good one.
Very nicely done.
I actually have looked into the toothbrushes where you get the replaceable heads or the bamboo ones. And I've used the recycled yogurt container ones also. But all of them are flat. I don't like that. I like the jagged that gets in between the teeth. So
electric? Wait, but that's the one that dentists recommend. I'm
not spending $200 on a toothbrush. Please.
Wait, no, but then you only replace the heads of the toothbrush every 30 days. Well, I guess those are probably more expensive than if you add it up with the monthly, but the weekly, the daily replacement of Blair's toothbrush.
I will also asterisk on this say that toothbrushes, shampoo containers, face wash containers, floss containers, all those things are recyclable. But not in your normal recycling container. So there are organizations that will send you free shipping labels, like TerraCycle, I think is one of them. So they'll send you free shipping labels to send your stuff. And if you pool it with some of your neighbors, some of your friends, stuff like that, and you get a good weight on it, then you start to get points that you can print out as coupons for
Buying more
purchasing
plastic
things.
stuff.
Yes. So so as much as plastics are a problem, there are certain beauty products that we haven't figured out how to get away from that. And so a good kind of meanwhile alternative is to support these organizations that'll take your plastic waste and recycle it. Pretty cool. So
That's very cool.
that's which I did promise, by the way. I met some sea turtles last week in Texas, and the master naturalists there at the Texas A&M Extension and the NOAA facility down there, they made us each promise that we would do something for sea turtles this week. And so my behest to all of you is to look up these recycling programs to reduce the amount of plastics ending up in the oceans, because turtles eat everything and they end up eating a lot of plastics out in the ocean.
Okay.
So you
so
can get rid of your single-use stuff, but also
I'm gonna drill
recycle
down
your
on
things that
drill
even
down on
you
this.
think might not be recyclable. Often they are.
Can you drill down a little bit on this? Do you know the number code of the plastics of which you speak? Because this is and the reason I'm asking you this
It's a good
is
question.
because there was a local story
Mhm.
about how much plastic is put into recycling in our local area, which doesn't get recycled because there isn't a buyer for it. And I'm probably getting this wrong, but one of them was the little plastic recycling code 5. I'm just guessing. But they were like, we don't have a buyer for this plastic, so we separate it from the rest of the recycling.
Yeah.
It goes into a landfill currently.
Right. So
Because we don't have a buyer for it. So if these are people who are buying,
yes.
couldn't
They're some of them are getting cleaned and reused by the particular companies depending on the packaging. So certain things like floss containers in theory can be used a few more times.
oh yeah.
So that's some of them, and then
Just
some
like
of
a
them
toothbrush, Blair.
some of them are being sold elsewhere. Some of them are being,
Oh my God,
processed
TerraCycle
in
does
other ways.
people recycling.
Really?
What?
No, it's pretty funny. They should really change the wording.
Oh, they're
I
missing
know they're
some
just trying to
commas.
say the number of people recycling. They've got their global impact on their website, terracycle.com. And you scroll down, it's TerraCycle's global impact. People recycling. 80 million. They've recycled 80 million people.
You know,
That's
really, when
so
you break
cool.
it down to nuts, bolts, livers, and kidneys, we're all the same anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
Wow, I didn't know they were that big. 4 billion. What is waste recycled? Is that 4 billion items?
Huh?
Guessing.
That's a good
That's still a
question.
lot.
Yeah.
But seriously, there's no units on these things. Come
Yeah.
on.
Another thing they take, snack bar wrappers. So like power bar wrappers and stuff like that.
Really?
They also take applesauce and fruit sauce pouch recycling. So
Pouches.
all of the pouches that the kids today are eating all the time. So they take those.
I feel
which
like
is
they're
really cool.
sponsored by the post office. Like how
Perhaps.
many of these things do I have to have collected for the dollar stamp to be worth the points that I know I'm putting things into a financial term, but money is an energy currency at this point anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is that it is more cost effective to repurpose than manufacture new a lot of the time. So it might be cheaper if you're Tom's of Maine to take back your deodorant containers and refill them than to make new containers. The postage is probably cheaper. So toothpaste tubes, deodorant containers, They take
Yeah, because
those.
I just throw
Yeah.
those things away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm lucky. We do it at work because we go
Mm.
through so many applesauce pouches and stuff like that for a lot of our younger classes. So
Mhm.
I can bring all that stuff to work and just throw it in the bin, and it gets sent out regularly, which is
But
great.
you're assuming it's getting recycled and not sorted out of the profitable recycling.
It's not going to municipal recycling. It's going to TerraCycle. So this is all this company does. Is they recycle things that are not municipally recyclable.
Well, okay, so okay, then like
They
if
figure
this
it
is
out.
a real thing, which I'm
Uh-huh.
assuming it is because I've heard it from Blair.
They've been around for a while. I feel like they would
Yeah,
have
they're
gone
big.
bankrupt if it wasn't a real thing.
Right. No, but then my point though is why aren't they just connecting to our local recycling center who's saying bring us your
That's a good question.
applesauce pouches and
Yeah.
we're going to send it to Tetracycle who's going to make it we're going to get enough points where we can order lunch boxes for everyone or whatever the thing is. Like why does it take a direct marketing campaign?
Yeah.
Anything
So
that's a direct marketing campaign is suspicious by the fact that it's a direct marketing campaign.
So I think there's a couple things going on here. One is that at least with the personal hygiene stuff, it's not created in great quantity. So if you think about it, how often do you throw away a deodorant container?
Oh, once every 7 years.
Right. That's exactly my point. And so that is going somewhere else or to a different person than the toothpaste tubes, than the floss, right? So this isn't I'll take all your personal beauty products. It's I'll take these, I'll take these, I'll take these, right? So TerraCycle is just the hub. They're just receiving the stuff and then sending the particular
Sending it
types
to
of
different
things
places.
in massive quantities once they're compiled in their hub to those specific markets.
You know, the more that we
and
talk about this subject, the more that I feel that my apparent lack of hygiene is actually doing more benefit than any other thing I should have to be worrying about doing. Like,
I mean, by showering less, you save water. By
showering
using less soap, you're
wearing
you're
less
polluting
deodorant,
less. Yeah.
brushing my teeth less, never having encountered dental floss, like
Yeah.
all of these things. Like
walking from one place to another in the heat of Davis.
I've done more.
Just, you know,
You have
just
saved,
showing up.
Justin, you have saved so many sea turtles, not
There you
even
go.
trying.
Just by
You're a sea turtle savior.
just by procrastinating or not like caring, I've actually done quite a bit that I'm proud of.
Good job.
To further the
there you go. You're doing it.
And right now, by not shaving,
Yeah.
you again are saving the environment.
Yeah.
Just killing it.
One procrastination event after the other, I will save this planet. If everybody put off showering, bathing, toothbrushing, flossing, shaving, car washing, but I can't even see out my front windshield anymore. If everybody followed Justin's path of least resistance, basically, if you cannot do it, don't do it. We could have a better planet, people.
It's true. This is fascinating, though. I'm like looking through. I'm gonna pull it up for you guys. I'm looking through the TerraCycle website, and it's like it's so broken down.
Mm-hmm.
This is the answer.
Nondescript units.
So they have different brigades.
I'll show you. No, I'll show you. So you get in. We're gonna look. They recycle. Oh, hold on. I gotta actually share my screen with you. Okay, people recycling. There we go. So I'm going to learn more. We go to learn more, and then it's like, oh, look, we've got these collection platforms, and let's see, free recycling programs. Oh, zero waste box. That's awesome. So let's see. I'm going to see all of the zero waste boxes. They have an action figures zero waste box.
Oh,
They
that's
have
cool.
waste boxes only for those plastic cups that are at parties. They have a all-in-one zero waste box. I guess that's when you put everything into. But they've got athletic balls, art supplies, automotive parts, baby gear, baby food pouches. Like it just bath
The
and
one
shower
thing, the one thing
accessories,
they're really bad
binders.
at,
The binders zero
the one
waste
thing they're
box
really bad at
where it's all
is
separated.
is if you follow all of these and do all of these one-offs into small cardboard boxes, they do impact deforestation.
That's
Like,
right.
apparently.
Maybe it's all post-consumer recycled material, Justin. You don't know.
Well,
But it
yeah,
is.
which takes away from other places that post-consumer recycled materials could be used.
I don't think
which
you need to
means-
be
Where do
worried
these-
about that.
Where
But
do these candy and snack wrappers go? So you have to pay for these boxes. You're paying for
okay, so there's a different.
you pay
let's
for
see.
that. You choose what you want to do, you collect it, then you ship it off, and then they recycle it. It's manually separated into
and they got
fibers
somebody in
and
a lab coat
plastics.
with doing science.
Okay, so
Although those aren't that's not proper lab eyewear. By the way.
What can you recycle those things into?
okay, so there's a lot. They have some free recycling programs too, though. So if you go, I
I'm
think
getting
it's
a
under-
cold, you guys. My nose is
Uh-oh.
sniffling.
Okay, so TerraCycle free recycling programs. So you can get usually by brand.
you
So
can get
like
them?
Arm & Hammer
I-
cleaning recycling program.
Where aren't because the company is subsidizing it, I bet.
Right. Brita
branded.
recycling program. I have a Brita filter. I hate throwing those things away. So
Yeah.
so in this way, I would join,
Yeah.
I would collect, I would ship for free, and that's it. I'd never see it again. So Brita dispensers, Brita bottles, Brita filters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, look. Contact lenses.
Yes.
Ocean loam.
So I don't want to bring this up if it's incorrect.
Oh, hold on. Here's an answer to your
What?
question, though, Justin. In this case, at least, the
Here's
Brita
the Cliff Bar.
products, they're separated by composition, shredded to make new products. The carbon filters are separated for use in polymers. And you can click to learn more on every single thing that they recycle. Yes, Justin?
What do they do with these
Thank you.
with these wrappers? What the heck? Foil lined what do they do with those?
Click on it.
Doesn't say what happens to
It
it. The wrappers and
doesn't?
pouches are cleaned and melted
So
into
again,
hard
here's the scientist.
plastic.
He's got the
Okay.
lab coat. That's good. He's got the gloves proper, but the eyewear doesn't seem sufficient.
It's not sufficient eyewear.
Okay, let's see. Energy bar recycling. What did they say? Oh, from Cliff Bar.
That's interesting. I can see my the garbage area of my house now. It will have 75 separate boxes.
I go through a decent amount of Cliff Bars, so that there's one aspect of this which seems
So, what
impressive.
what we do at the zoo is we collect things into gallon-sized Ziplocs, which again, now you're dealing with plastic, but I mean, at some point you have to decide what is the sum win, right? But so in this case, we just kind of gather into gallon-sized Ziplocs, and when it's full, zip it up. Wait till you have a couple, and then you ship them together. So it has to be something. It's definitely more helpful if it's something that you go through a lot. Okay, so the wrappers and pouches are cleaned and melted into hard plastic
Yeah.
that can be remodeled to make new recycled products. Neat. What's wrong with this guy's eyewear, Justin?
It's not sufficient.
It's not
It's not
sufficient
sufficient.
eyewear.
You either have
It's just a pair of
the
glasses.
side clip-ons or be proper goggles. You can't just wear regular glasses in a lab and think that you've got eye protection.
No, but
It's not
so
how
so
this
then
works.
I'm imagining the future of my house with a number of these cardboard boxes in it to collect my, detergent bottles and
Mm-hmm.
snack wrappers and everything. I'm gonna have all these boxes, and my husband will ignore every single one of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It'll be, yeah. I have a hard enough time getting him to put some things in the recycling and not in the garbage.
Just so that
Isn't that-
everybody has a full understanding of what we're saying here. Regardless of what your recyclables are, you should collect them up into like groups, put them in Ziploc bags, and mail them to one
the right address.
in Ziploc bags that you can
wasn't the right
put within other Ziploc bags, which will go right to the place that they need to go. I think this was a fantastic. Say goodnight, Blair.
It was fantastic.
Good night,
You know,
Blair.
I do hope that everyone has a great Halloween. What are you going to be for Halloween, Blair?
Well, for Boo at the Zoo, I'm going to be Oscar the Grouch this year.
Awesome.
But for my personal fun Halloween adult stuff, I am being Elektra from Netflix Daredevil.
Oh, very fun. Nice. I like it. I like it.
What about you, Kiki?
Well, I am going to be a unicorn.
What's Kai?
You like unicorns.
Kai is going to be Finn the human from
That's-
Adventure Time.
Yes. How about Marshall?
Marshall is going to be a giant astronaut.
Okay.
He found well,
Nope.
found it's going good. I can't wait to get a picture of him wearing this costume. He found an inflatable astronaut suit.
Wow.
So it's got like a big helmet and the whole thing. It's like inflatable. It's got hoses and everything. So he'll be a big floaty astronaut.
Cool.
It's gonna be great.
And Justin, you'll be Burt Reynolds, I guess.
Or he's going
for
to be a
Glenn.
French philosopher. He will go and talk about.
Tom Selleck. It's Tom Selleck.
I'm going as the thing I always go as sexy pirate.
Sexy pirate. There we go. Tom Selleck dressed as a sexy pirate.
Yeah.
He went to UC Davis, by the way.
Did he?
He was a swimmer of some sort.
I don't know. Apparently, he still lives in Davis.
Does he?
What?
No.
Oh. This Tom Selleck. I get it now. It's late.
It is. Okay, now that I know everybody's Halloween costumes, I'm satisfied. I hope you all have a lovely Halloween. I will miss you all. I think I'll enjoy not editing the show for a week next week. That'll be nice to have a little bit of an editing break. But in terms of doing the show, I will miss you all terribly. But I'll have a fun Halloween, and I hope you all do too. Yes, and the Dias de los Muertos after that, and then we will come back, and November time is coming on, episode 694 coming up. 2 weeks.
Hooray.
Hooray! Time for us to go to bed now.
Okay, say goodnight, Justin.
Good night, Justin. Say good night, Blair.
Good night, Blair.
Good
Good night, Kiki.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for watching. Bootastic. Beautiful science.